Hello everybody, my name is Vít Procházka and I would like to welcome you in the third tutorial from the WireSoul series. And this tutorial will be actually first part of the two-parted tutorial, and because I want the second part to be about baking textures like ambient occlusion, shadows, color maps, and every time you need bake some texture, you actually have to have UV unwrapped mesh. So I decided to make this first part only about proper UV unwrapping, about what is actually UV unwrapping and how to do it in Blender. This tutorial will be probably more lecture than a tutorial because it will be more technical or theoretical. Uh, so you can actually uh, use it anywhere in maybe in any software which has UV unwrapping. But I will talk mainly about features that are identical for every proper UV unwrapping in general. Mm. When you want, or if you want some tutorial which is exactly step by step how place seams, what key on the keyboard hit, or how to do it like one uh, exact object. Look wherever you want on YouTube or wherever Google, uh, and look regardless of software because UV unwrapping is actually across the softwares all the same idea. Uh, you can maybe have different shortcuts, different methods, but the result should be same in Blender and in 3D Max, in Maya, and everywhere. Well, let's start it. Let's get our feet wet, and I will start as usual in my like it GIMP with little bit of theory. What is actually UV unwrapping and what the UV stands for? Well, if you are modeler or general 3D artist, you should be familiar with three-dimensional space. And these three dimensions we use to name like X, Y, or Z. Z and Y are changing uh, if you are from America, you probably have Y up. If you are from Europe, you are used to the Z is up. It's just the naming convention. It doesn't change anything inside the software. And for the better understanding or make it easier, we will uh, place ourselves in the only two-dimensional space. So we will have only X and Y, and in this space there could be 4 points which will make some polygons. And this this is actually something very common. You know it probably. If you don't know it, you should actually watch some more basic tutorials or modeling or general 3D art. And somewhere else we can have the exactly the same thing, our X and Y, and there will be our texture. There could be like little house, little tree, nice tree, and sun. It could be photo, it could be a painted image, whatever. But uh, when I want to render this, I am making this tutorial especially for game engine, but you can render it uh, via cycles, via Blender internal, or every other renderer. You actually uh, don't want only some shader, but you can want, uh, for example, this sun to be in the plane like texture. So you don't want to use all the photo. You want to be specific that I want this plane to be like it was right here. And it's pretty much done, and it's really easy. It should be easy for understanding. And how the computer actually understand it, he will take that this plane is, for example, plane number one. It has four different vertices or points, so it make somewhere inside a list that number one has 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and then he takes some x and y values for placing it in space. It actually takes the z value, but we are in 2 dimension. And uh, there is nothing easier than tell we have another uh, coordinates for where to place it in the texture. So there should be another x and another y. But this is problem for computer, because computer is a mathematically based machine. So when I tell him that for the modeling, for example, x equals 3 for this point, and on the texture I want this x to be like 1, it can be possible because only one variable equals two different values, and it's not possible in computer. So again, nothing easier than change the letter. Just instead of using x and y, we will use u and v, and this is where the UV from UV unwrapping is. It's actually just another naming for the same axis. Uh, you can encounter same as you have X, Y, and Z for up. If you have, for example, procedural generated texture, it can be 3 dimensional, so it change with third dimension. So you will have U, V, and W. It's same thing, you just add another letter for another value. So actually, if you are in 3D software and you adding points, changing their places, you actually change this value. And this changing this value is called modeling. You probably know about it. It's just like it. You change these values, you model another planes. And if you change the next values for the points, uh, well, here I want. So you changing UVs, you are unwrapping. So when you changing UVs, you doing UV unwrapping. And it's pretty much it. It's all the magic. You just model again the same thing, but on the texture or on the different two-dimensional space. But you can see now that I have three connected faces here, but I place these faces uh, separately on the image. It's possible in UV because, uh, for example, this vertex 3 has could have as much this UV coordinates, so another UV, as many faces are connected to it. Sorry. So this point 3 could actually be here, this point 3, and could be here, and it will be the same point with the two different coordinates for UV. So this plane number 1 will be the sun, and plane number 2, which share points 3 and 4, will show as texture the 3. And again, if there will be 6th and 7th vertex, it will be share with 3, and in the polygon which will be uh, on the house. So if you would have uh, even more polygons from one vertex, this vertex would actually have one coordinates for its place and 4 different coordinates for UV. And because this tutorial is especially for game engine, so I would like to mention that game engine actually works only with the textures and the UV coordinates. So if you have uh, your poly count and count of vertex for the game, never look on number of vertices. It's pretty much irrelevant for you. Uh, the value that you are interested in is always number of faces, because faces are rendered, vertices are only right somewhere in list. It could possibly uh, make bigger your physic uh, memory uh, of, of the game, so the game don't have like 1 GB but 1.1 1.1 gigabyte on the hard drive, but the performance will be exactly the same. And with this knowledge of what is actually UV unwrapping, we can go uh, right to the Blender and show some examples right on this cube. This you should see in the default settings always the cube, and we place there new editor, which will be UV image editor. And UV unwrapping is always made in edit mode, so enter the edit mode and press U. And now you are see uh, how many possible ways are to UV unwrap this cube in three-dimensional space to our two-dimensional space on the texture. And if you want make same setting as in the game preview, you just press reset and it makes every face to take all the texture. And in Blender is defaultly set that what you have selected in the 3D preview, in the 3D window, it's actually all you can see in the UV image editor. So uh, all these faces just disappear from this. You see only what is selected, and you can uh, apply for this uh, all the same operation as if you were modeling. You just model only into the space, so you can scale the face, you can rotate, you can grab it, and you can even work with vertices. I just place the 3D cursor, the 2D cursor, and model as you would work with simple plane. For better understanding what is happening, it's always good to have some texture, uh, and Blender has very good uh, texture for testing UVs. Just name it anyhow, um, UV test, width and height. You can change it however you want, but always is best to have first and second value same, so you will have square texture, and best is have the values in power of 2, so we will have like 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 248. Just if you if 1024 is few or too few for you, and you will need something like 12, 20, 1200 or 1300, you actually should use 280, 48, and don't use all the image. I will show you it later in the tutorial. And you just don't want general blank texture, but UV grid and OK, and you will get this nice texture, so you will see what's happening. Just make this view not solid but textured. And why it's not showing, I will see in display. So change it back to solid and texture solid, and if you make sure that your image is your UV test, you should see the texture applied right on the face. So I reset it again, so all this image is applied on the cube when I'm selecting all, and just force the texture to the cube. You can see it, and I can for example say that this particular face should be on this part of the image. So I select it all, scale it down. You can see in the 3D preview view how it's changing in real time, what is actually happening. And I just placed the UV coordinates where I want them, and if this part of the image will be like the sun, I will have it right here, and I can do it for all the faces. I can place this somewhere here, or I probably would want to rotate it somehow, and it always be as I place it there. So it's good that you can manipulate with faces like this, but it's good have this control when you have like 6 polygons, like in this case. But what if we will have, for example, the monkey? Now, if I would reset this, I will see that some polygons are only triangles in this mesh, but I really don't want to take every one of them and place it where I want. So I would like to use some other functions which are in Blender, the different projections, and it will try to place all these polygons in the 2D texture and uh, get rid of overlapping, so you won't have 1 pixel of the texture in 2 parts of your mesh. And all these things are just different ways to make the same thing. For example, if you try Smart UV project, which is a very good tool for you if you want just paint your texture directly to the model, or bake the texture, so you really don't care where the seams are. uh, you just take the angle limit when the seam should be cut in the mesh, just hit OK, and you will see that I get rid of the image, so it will be easier to see in the image editor that Blender takes this mesh as it would be like paper model and cut it on few parts, so it can unfold it to the two-dimensional plane. I don't know if you ever try to put together with glue some paper models, but this is exactly the same uh, prog process, but reverse. You have already your model complete. You just take the scissors, cut it in some places, and unfold it to the plane, and it will make these islands. If you want to select island, just press L in the Blender, and it will try to place all these islands, so it will take as much place as it can, but as you see in some places like here, there is actually overlapping, so you don't want to see this, and it needs a lot of work for get rid of all these mistakes, and it's pretty much mis there is pretty much every mistake in every automatic projection, because you always have your pros and cons. pros are in this pretty much always the quick solution. So you just can like light map, okay, and it will make, just try to use the space as much as possible. Or for example, cube projection, cylinder projection, and sphere projection are always best if you have your mesh as cube, cylinder, or sphere. On the monkey, it will not have the wanted effect. Uh, but if I just unwrap it without any settings, it means it doesn't cut it anywhere. It just take what it is and try to unfold it. You encounter to stretching. It means that this part of the monkey, like the face, has too few uh, pixels on the texture than the other parts. Stretching is actually scaling the polygon in only one dimension. So when I get back to the grid, you will see that, for example, here you have very dense texture with lots of pixels. It's sharp, and too many squares are visible on little place. But for example, here it's exactly opposite. You have too few pixels. Uh, the edges of the squares are deformed, so it's not exactly square. And all these are mistakes in UV unwrapping. And for getting rid of this stretching, you just can place these seams or these cuts wherever you want. Just select some edges, so it's best to have edge selected, and with Alt you can select edge loops, which are very useful when you making seams, and press W and select sorry, not W, but uh, Control E for edges, and here is mark seam, and of course there is even clear seam when you have get rid of it. Now we telling the blender that this edge loop should be cut it off, so it will make a separate part for the face and separate part for the rest of the mesh for now. So I just select everything again, U and unwrap, and I see there it placed the face here, and it's already, you can see the squares are more or less squares, and their size are pretty much even. But here you can see again there is some stretching. So where is stretching, you need to place seams always. When you placing seams, have always in mind that the seams will be visible on the final uh, object. Even if you are good enough that you make this uh, squares equal in both parts, the rotation of this plane on the image is different than the neighbor one. Where is here? So the pixels in the texture actually don't follow one line, but are break here, so the seams will be always visible. Uh, so if you placing the seams, there is never the only one the right way. You just have to experiment, do it multiple times on multiple objects. Just try to find out the best what uh, is suits you, because you need to have many seams for have uh, very few distortions in the texture, but you want to hide them, like place the seam on this edge. It's ideal because this edge won't probably never be seen, or here under it's is good place for seam because it's covered somewhere. And when you have all your seams where you want them, so place for example one here and unwrap it again, you will get these UV islands in the UV image editor, and the next step is always place them somewhere that it works for you the best. I see here I need another seam, but as you can see, uh, I don't really know where exactly this is on the monkey, so I can check the uh, check this option which keeps UV in edit mode mesh selection in sync, so you will saw all your UV coordinates without selection of the Susan itself, the monkey. And when you select something in the UV image editor, you can find it selected in the mesh like here. And if it's selected, you can just mark seam here, unwrap it, and I have face. I just turned this off. Face of the monkey, two halves of its skull, and this is two eyes. Uh, Now I have to place these uh, islands, so I uh, use as much of this image as possible. Uh, you always have to use as much of your texture as possible, because you don't want to waste your memory for the pixels that never be rendered on the actually object. So you use all the classic tools like scaling, grabbing, rotation, and try to make something. This is not ideal, but it's something. When you have placed it, always remember few things. I activate the UV grid again. Uh, the rule for the texturing is always to have as few stretching as possible and the same textile density on the all ob mesh all object. About stretching, it's pretty much common sense to make it that if I have squares on the texture, I want actually squares here. So if something is like here stretched and deformed, it's wrong. You have to put more seams on the ears and just move them. You can actually use even proportional editing in the UV image editor. So when I hit O and scale, I can scale, for example, this ear. So I see I am putting more pixels to the ear, but I stretch them from the skull, so I will have to place there some seams and make it separate island. Uh, so stretching is pretty much makes sense and you want to do it, but the textile density is very commonly mistaken, and this is probably the most important part of this tutorial uh, because I saw this mistake in the AAA games, in the um, arts, the, the teachers, and even the textbooks uh, have textile density theme uh, very commonly wrong or is the most mistaken rule that, in the texturing. If you have, for example, something like this door, it could be anything that is a pretty big object with one little small detail. So when you have modeling classes or modeling tutorials, they will teach you to use wisely your geometry. So you will place more vertices on this door handle or door knob. On the little detail will be always no, or should be always a higher density of vertices because it actually define uh, the silhouette of your object and you want it and it's necessary. You don't want to have some vertices on these big planes because it's wasting of the memory. But sometimes, and it's many times, and many people will try to tell you that you should do same thing with the texture. So you will have a higher density of the pixels for this little detail and fewer for the rest of the door. And it's plain wrong. Never do this. It's mistake and it's very visible. It's kind of the mistakes that you see some picture and you don't really know what is wrong, but you know there is something wrong. So this is one of the mistakes that has this uh, this impact. Uh, so when I already have some UV textures, UV coordinates for this door. It's just smart UV project. Okay, it makes everything for me, and I place there my testing grid. You will see that Blender already know about the texture density, so it makes the squares same size on the doors and on the handle. Sometimes uh, you will end up with some space in the texture which is unused. So some even some teachers or even in books it's written that you should take the part which is detail and scale it so it fit, and this is really wrong. Never do this. It's most important part of this tutorial. For everything you will do, uh, never scale only one island from your UV coordinates. Every time you see that you can uh, place more things here, never try to uh, use this UV coordinates to fill the place. I know the it's really against the common sense to don't waste your pixels, but you if you have some project where you will have uh, more objects or some environment, some level of the game or some scene for your render, or always define your texture density before you will actually do every texturing and even modeling. So for example, if you define that you have 256 pixels for every meter of your geometry, uh, try to stay in this density through all your object, even the small details. They, if they're small, they get less pixels. It's simple. And uh, if this door gets his uh, 256, and for example, if it's 2 meters high, so 512, you place it on the texture, scale it so it fits the texture density you choose. Let it be like it. You will see uh, there is plenty of space which is unused in the moment, so it's wasted. But you will probably have more objects in the scene, so learn to use one texture for multiple objects. When you have, for example, the different door, just place their texture to their UV coordinates to the same texture. So you will actually use the spared space, but never try to fill it for any price, because you will end up in the you will have nice door because you will look at them. It will be maybe action uh, object in the game, but it will be in the wall, and the wall will have a different texture density. You will see that this door doesn't belong there. You will see that the lighting will be different, uh, the quality is different in the object which are very near to each other, where for example if this door I have different parts of the texture, so I will make it something weird, and I will see that this door doesn't belong to each other. Even if there will be wood texture or anything else, never make different texture density in your level or in your scene, especially in the little details on one object. So even if this handle is small, uh, the squares on the object should always be the same size. This is why for the UV unwrapping you should use always this texture, or there are similar with little circles or just predefined geometrical shapes and colors. So you will see where is your texture, if it's stretched or deformed somehow, and most importantly that the squares are same size in through the all your object and through the all objects in the scene. Uh, only uh, only time when you want actually change the resolution is with distance from the camera. It's called level of detail, so something that will be close to the camera uh, should have better resolution or higher resolution than something uh, which is in longer distance. So if the door will be far away, it could have a worse resolution, but if you actually look from the camera, you will see that the squares on the both doors are still same size or very similar size. If I zoom to this door, it has lesser resolution, bigger squares, but it's far away, so the squares are actually same size in this case, and it's right. Uh, you actually don't need to calculate or even make these textures for faraway objects, because uh, not only Blender but pretty much any game engine uh, or maybe even any 3D software has a function which is called mip mapping, and this mip mapping actually calculate how many pixels are used for the object. So it's far away, it will change the resolution of the texture itself, not only on the object but the actual texture which is loaded for this particular object. It's calculated on the graphics card, and uh, you should use it every time in Blender is activated in default, so you don't need to worry about it. It actually calculate even the angle of looking. So if you are something like here, you see again less pixels on this face. So the map mapping guarantee that this texture will have even lesser resolution. Uh, but the map mapping works uh, in whole numbers. So uh, this time it's one resolution and it's still the same, and in one distance it will jump to another resolution lesser, and again in other distance it jumps again to even lesser resolution. But if you make game, uh, you will encounter to one line of code. This tutorial isn't on programming. This will be only one line, which will be, for example, for Blender Game Engine BGE, render set map, I believe, and in the bracelet could be true or false. So you actually turn this function on or turn it off. But the right magic is when you put there number 2. It's only number you can put in this function, and it will turn this map mapping to linear. So it will uh, smoothly, seamlessly change the resolution even in one plane. If I will look like this, so there will be a higher resolution than in the other end, and I shouldn't be able to see how it's changing. It should make it uh, evenly and somewhere in the graphics card under the hood, and it's not really affecting the frame per seconds. No, of course it affected, but it's very insignificant or very small affection. But why I am talking about it, uh, and what it's have doing with UV unwrapping, uh, you see that there is separate islands, and for example, this two islands for the door are lying next to each other, so there is no space between them. And when I get back to the game and I, for example, make like black rectangle here, and it will be my texture, and in this part will be my seam between the two islands, and in some distance from the camera map mapping will decrease the resolution, and for the better visuals it will blur it. So when I am blur this texture like something very high to be seen, these colors will actually mix one to each other. I will get gradient here, and uh, my UV coordinates will be right, will have border right in the middle. Oh, sorry, it should be straight line, but it means that in this uh, part of the door, for example, there should be only black color, but now in the seam I see the white color, and again where it should be only white color I will see the black, and it will mean that the seam will be visible and very visible, not only that the uh, pixels will be different ways because of the coordinates, for example, right, like this, you will see that the pixels don't really follow one line, but now you will see actually color difference, and it's hard to hide it in the object. So always when you have uh, different islands, and you probably will have it always when you unwrap something, you want to set margin, and as any function in the Blender, after you apply it, like you smart UV project, okay, you have a chance to go uh, to the tools, for example, and set the values for the projection. or with fx f6, and there is island margin, and this value you can see on the left makes the uh, um, gap between the islands. The uh, some some pixels will be actually unused by the texture, and when there is straight line and mapping will blur it, the gradient of the blur will actually not affect any of these planes. So have it always in mind. It will be even more important uh, when baking textures, and this tutorial is actually preparing for baking more than anything else. And well, and it will be pretty much all the important. There are of course some other specify technique for UV unwrapping, but it will get not only one tutorial but tutorial series, and I already spent too much time or on this. Uh, for example, you can pin some of the already UV unwrapped vertices. So if I pin this vertices like UV's pin, I can unwrap the object again, and this vertices should already be on the place. So I will actually unwrap only the rest of the uh, object of the mesh. Uh, I can see even uh, the stretching and spacing. I believe. Oh, there is some changing in layout. Well, I can see the stretch for angles or for area, and you can see this textile density. If I take this and stretch it, it will scream on me on red that this doesn't belong to the others UV coordinates. So I have to small it, uh, scale it down, so it will be all blue. I see this is actually one face is wrong, so I could take this. Oh, it's not connected, and stretch it like this. So everything should be blue, even with angle. It means same thing, but with angles. So when I'm changing this, it again scream at me different colors that I am stretching this texture so it will be deformed. And these uh, tools, there are many of them, and you really should see even other tutorials for UV unwrapping, and I really recommend you to don't stick with Blender. With UV unwrapping, go to the Maya tutorials, 3D Max tutorials, Cinema 4D tutorials. Uh, every this soft uh, every software has the same basic idea of getting uh, one coordinates from 3D space to the coordinates of the texture, and different ways to do it. So keep in mind the stretching, the textile density, it's most important, and the merging between the UV islands. Uh, Final thing that I will show you, it's exporting the UV layout, because it's something you will actually need. It will export the image somewhere you want, export UVs, and I can open them in the game, for example, or just show them, and it's nothing more than image with alpha channel where you can see your UV coordinates. So when you hand paint uh, the texture, you will paint it right here, and if you know what part is what, you can just draw something. You will know that this is front part of the door, this is side part, this is the handle, and you can uh, you know where you actually paint it. And it's pretty much all for this tutorial. The next one will be about the baking, the actually tutorial what is important for game engine and any other application. I hope you like it. Uh, I know that I still didn't get much better than the previous tutorials, but I'm really trying. And be prepared for the baking. Try another tutorials for UV unwrapping, and don't forget support, of course, WireSoul. Uh, you can support it however you want, not only with donation, but just playing the demo. I really need your feedback, so try it and write anywhere to me. I read all comments uh, on this YouTube channel, on Facebook page, on my page, of official web, everywhere. Or just tell your friends about it, and it's all support I need. Uh, Finally, till the next time, bye.